What's up, everybody? Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. This AC in the hotel room is loud. So I don't know if you guys can hear that in the background. I'll try and shut it off if you can hear it. That light's going. Hold on. Much better. All right, we'll wait for some people to trickle in. Don't know if we'll have a full stream tonight, just in terms of the number of people in after that debacle. Well, as always, let me know what you're drinking. I stopped at Sprouts and picked up a local beer from Eureka Heights Brewing. Wow Factor Hoppy Pilsner. Shout out to Eureka Heights. It's very delicious. What's everyone drinking? Well, Moscow Mule. Love it. Anyone else? Well, mint julep with High West whiskey. Good whiskey. We got some water. We got a Modelo. Give it another couple minutes. Let people trickle in. I don't know how many people we're going to have tonight. I don't know how many of you guys actually want to relive that. We got somebody drinking scotch. Adam's drinking scotch. What kind of scotch are you drinking, Adam? Bleach on the rocks. I don't blame you after that. Well, Don Julio. The cheap stuff. All right, we got some people trickling in. So I don't even know where to start. The Chargers lose to the Texans 41-29 in a game they absolutely had to have. Absolutely had to have. And I wrote this in my takeaways. For those that aren't subscribed to The Athletic, click the link below. You'll get my takeaways. We actually have a deal going on right now through the end of the year, $24 a month. $24 a month. That's not correct. $24 for the whole year, so $2 a month. It's a really good deal. So if you still haven't gotten into The Athletic and want to read my takeaways from the game, click that link below. I wrote this in my takeaways. This is a game that they had to have, and it was not a trap game. There's no trap games in December, all right? There's no trap games when you're 8-6 and fighting for a playoff spot. Like, that doesn't exist. I can understand earlier in the season you overlook a team and you have a trap game in that sense when it's early in the season and teams are still figuring themselves out and the playoff race isn't heating up to maximum temperature, right? You cannot overlook anyone at this time of year. And that's what happened in this game. The Chargers just did not look prepared to play the game, particularly defensively. And listen, I understand the COVID situation, right? 14 active roster players didn't play in this game. 13 were on the list. Michael Davis actually started feeling ill on the field during pregame warmups, and he actually tested positive after going to the locker room and telling team officials that he wasn't feeling well. So he was the 14th guy. Derwin James didn't play. Joey Bosa is out. Chris Rumph is out. Kyler Fackrell's on IR. Drew Tranquill gets hurt in the game. You're down to Von Campbell, Trey Marshall, Keemon Hall. And you're throwing a bunch of guys out there who haven't played a lot this season for the Chargers defensively. Amen Agbagbamiga, Nick Neiman having to replace Drew Tranquill for the second half. You have Devontae Harris, who the Chargers claimed off waivers November 30th, starting at outside corner once Michael Davis goes out. At some point, they benched Devontae Harris because he's struggling. And they bring in Asang Bassi, who they claimed off waivers last week on Monday, not even a week ago. He's playing in the slot. And they move Chris Harris outside. And I understand that. The COVID situation was real. Justin Jones, obviously, another big piece out. And I'm going to get more into Justin Jones' impact tomorrow in my final thoughts because I started digging into the run numbers when he's on the field versus off the field, and it's ridiculous. So I'll get more on that tomorrow or Tuesday morning when I write the final thoughts. But it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse. You got Justin Herbert playing quarterback. You got Keenan Allen. You got your all-pro left tackle, Rashawn Slater. Corey Linsley's out, right? But you got Matt Filer at left guard. You got Jared Cook in there. You got enough pieces. I mean, defensively, you have Linval Joseph. You got Uchenna Nwosu. You got Kaiser White, who, you guys were all clamoring to should have made the Pro Bowl. You got Nasir Adderley in there. Alohi Gilman's played a lot of ball this year. They had a lot more talent than the Texans did. And the Texans had 16 players on the COVID list, including 9 starters. 3 of them on the offensive line, and their best player, Brandon Cooks, was out. I mean, defensively, this was their worst performance of the year. I just want to throw some stats out at you guys, all right? This is how bad the Texans were offensively through the first 15 weeks of the season, okay? They ranked dead last heading into this game in offensive DVOA, in EPA per rush, in EPA per drive, in EPA per play, in rushing DVOA, in yards per play, in yards per game, in offensive success rate, in explosive plays. And they scored the second fewest points of any team in the league through 15 weeks. You're telling me that you can't stop that? I mean, Rex Burkhead rushed for 145 yards. He's 31 years old. He's in his 9th season. That guy's not a legitimate running back anymore. Well, apparently he is. But the Chargers could not stop the run. I mean, it was disastrous. Listen to these statistics, okay? Through 15 weeks of the season, the Texans had 9 explosive rushes. 9. That's it. 14 games, 15 weeks, 9 explosive rushes. They had 5 explosive rushes tonight. That's more than 50% of their year-to-date total of explosive rushes in one game. They could not stop Rex Burkhead. Straight up. I think a lot of it was they really struggled on the edge. And I know Brandon Staley said after the game that Kenneth Murray held his own. I disagree. I mean, and it's not on Kenneth Murray because he's playing out of position. What's on Kenneth Murray is that he hasn't played well enough to play linebacker. But you're struggling because of the COVID situation. With Fackrell on IR, you don't have any edge rushers. And so you put Kenneth Murray on the edge. And, I mean, he got blown off the ball on that 25-yard run by Rex Burkhead. So I'm getting ahead of myself here. But the defensive performance was, it was abysmal. It was truly abysmal. And at some point, right, you look at this and you say, okay, what's going on here? Brandon Staley obviously is a good defensive coach, what he did with the Rams defense last year. So what's going on here? And I'm going to get more in this in my final thoughts tomorrow. But the defensive line is not good enough defending the run when they don't have Justin Jones. They don't have enough game-breaking players up there to defend the run consistently. And without Drew Tranquil, they don't really have the linebacking core either. But on top of that, the third down defense is a problem, man. And it's been a problem all season. But the freaking Texans go 9 of the Texans. Davis Mills, no Brandon Cooks. It's Philip Dorsett and Chris Conley, right? 9 of 13 on third down. The Chargers entered this game with the worst third down defense in the league, and they only widened that margin in this game. They're now allowing opposing offenses to convert over 50% of third downs. You want to know how many times that's happened since 1990 when the NFL started tracking third down conversion rate? One time that any defense is allowed over a course of a season opposing offenses to convert more than 50%. The Chargers would be the second team. It's been that bad. And so what's going on here? Why can't they get off the field on third down? Why isn't this pass defense better? Well, they haven't had Derwin James. Obviously, that's a factor. But I think the bigger issue here is that they've had all of this attrition, and they really haven't spent, and I'm going to get into more of this in my final thoughts, but on Tuesday, but they really haven't had their full secondary on the field for that many snaps this season. Chris Harris goes down with a shoulder injury early in the year. Derwin's been out now for 3 weeks. Nas Adderley has been out. Alohi Gilman has missed time, which has limited the amount of dime that they can play. You've had Michael Davis miss time. right? You've had Asante Samuel Jr. miss time. Now Tavon Campbell has missed a game. And when you have that many moving pieces in a defense that this complex in terms of their coverage systems, you're going to have breakdowns. You have to be connected in this defensive scheme, and they just haven't had enough time on the field, and they have too many backups playing to successfully execute the scheme. And I'll get into more on this, but just to talk about it a little bit, like we've had in these streams conversations about defensive philosophy, right? Yeah, and Brandon brings up that Mark Webb missed time too. Yeah, that's a guy that would have played a lot with Alohi out the last 5 games, and he's been on IR. It's another really good point there. So that's really the situation that they're looking at, where you've had all these moving pieces, and just going back to what I was talking about with defensive philosophies, right? And we've talked about this before. Everyone hated the way Gus Bradley played defense, but there was a strategy behind it. Like, well, he wasn't just doing this because he wanted to and had no logic behind it. His thought process was, if you have a relatively simple defense, it allows players to play fast, and then when you do have attrition, the young players that are coming in, the guys you claim on waivers, et cetera, they can come in and play faster and learn the scheme faster. What the Chargers are doing here is they don't have enough bodies. So they're going out and they're claiming guys from the Broncos who have played in Vic Fangio's scheme that can come in and learn this defense relatively quickly. But that's obviously not translating, right? And so this is the difference in philosophy. Like when it works, when the complex approach, the Brandon Staley approach works, and you're throwing out all these different coverage schemes, and you're mixing it up man and zone and cover 3 and cover 2, and you have all of your players healthy, right? It works. That's what happened with the Rams last year. It looks great. But when you have this complex system and you're constantly shuffling players, this is what you get. You get one of the worst third down defenses in the history of the NFL. The floor for a Gus Bradley system is much higher. And that's the battle here. I'm not saying one approach is right and one approach is wrong. But when you have a more simplified defense, you can onboard, as Brandon Staley would say, these different players and get them playing at a high level. Like the Chargers, when they lost Derwin and Roderick Teamer was in there, they were bad. They weren't this bad. So overall, here's where the playoffs stand. I mean, the Chargers had to win this game, and they lost it. And now they're 8-7, and they're out of the playoffs. There's a 3-way tie for that 7th spot between the Raiders, Ravens, and Chargers. And the way the tiebreaker works is that you weed out any teams that are in the same division. So you only have one team standing from each division. So you start with the Raiders and the Chargers. Chargers have that head-to-head victory over the Raiders. And so the Raiders get knocked out. So then it's a tiebreaker between the Ravens and the Chargers. The Ravens obviously beat the Chargers in week 6, so they get that spot. So now you got 2 division games left on the schedule that you pretty much have to win to even have a shot to get in the playoffs, considering the way that things have shaken out, because the Colts are 9-6 and the Pats are 9-6. Bills have taken over first place in the AFC East. The Titans get that huge win on Saturday, and they maintain first place in the AFC South over the Colts. And then Cincinnati took over first place in the AFC North today with that big win over the Josh Johnson-led Ravens, right? So that's where things stand. I mean, you can't drop games like this at this time of the year, and that's what I was getting at earlier. Like you can't have trap games. You can't show up to a game like this and not be prepared. Even if it is the Texans that have 16 guys on COVID, even if it is already one of the worst rosters in the league that is beleaguered, it doesn't matter. You have to show up, and it really falls on everybody. The depth isn't good enough. I'm not going to get into that because I've written about it. We've talked about it. The depth has been exposed. The 3 areas of weakness that I pointed to before the season was defensive line, offensive line, and safety. Those are 3 areas that have been exposed because of depth. And then cornerback, they don't have enough talent there. And they've really, really dealt with some cornerback absences this season. That's just the reality. But so obviously the depth got exposed. It has pretty much been exposed in all of their losses this year. But to me, this was the first time I felt like the coaching wasn't there from a preparation standpoint, from a let's get these guys ready to play perspective, from a game planning perspective. I mean, offensively, they were great outside of the turnovers. I did not think the offense was the problem. I mean, they led the league in offensive success rate this week. They were 11th in EPA per play. They moved the ball effectively in that first half. The turnovers just killed them. That pick by Herbert at the end of the half was killer. The fumble by Justin Jackson was killer, but they moved the ball effectively. It really was the defense that failed them today. So that's where things stand. It's a bad loss. It's a bad loss, and there's really no other way to explain it. All right, give me those questions. Thoughts on what they should do with Kenneth Murray? Yeah, it's a tough situation. I mean, moving forward, he's a depth linebacker behind Kaiser and Drew. Gives him some flex with Kaiser at the negotiating table, who that are going to highlight his skill set. The problem is he got injured in training camp. He hurt his ankle, and then he hurt the ankle again. He missed 6 weeks, and they just haven't had him on the field enough, on the practice field enough, and even on the game field enough because of the injuries to really figure out what that role is. And right now, they need him edge because they don't have enough players. They don't have enough bodies, and that's the role that he has to fill right now. And oh God, we've got the trolls. Let's ban. So they just haven't had enough time with Kenneth to really figure out what role will suit him best and will help maximize his abilities. And so he's got talent, obviously from a physical perspective, but he has a long way to go from a football IQ perspective to be the type of player that he's capable of being. And I think his season might have turned out differently if he didn't roll that ankle in the scrimmage at SoFi in training camp. But that's just the reality of the situation. And, they're not going to cut him. It's not, he's still a talented player on a rookie deal. It would be idiotic to move on from him, even to trade him, because you're not going to be able to get much on the trade market for him, based on what he's put on tape and his production. So, the best thing to do is to keep him on the roster and try and find a role for him that works. And he has a skill set where you can find a role that works for him. It just has to be the right role. Like, I don't think he's going to be an every down linebacker. He just can't do the necessary things. He isn't consistent enough to be that type of player. The other thing we haven't talked about a lot is that Ryan Smith tore his ACL, and that's been a big factor in some of this corner play because they felt like they could get decent play out of Ryan Smith. Obviously, been in the league a while, hadn't played a ton on defense, but losing him when pretty much the first game that he got into game action as a cornerback, I think, kind of threw a wrench into the plans in terms of the cornerback depth. Did this guy just go to a second account? That is sad. Ban. Let's get some bans in the chat. Ban. Oh, this tape is going to be interesting to watch. I'll tell you guys that. Because I don't think it's going to look pretty for this defensive front. I mean, obviously, but I'm just kind of curious where the lapses were. Do the Dolphins jump the Chargers if they win? So if the Dolphins win, obviously they go to 8-7, and at that point it comes down to conference record. So basically, if 3 teams are tied and they're all in different divisions, and all 3 of them have not played each other, then it comes down to conference record. So in the current case with the 3-way tie, there's 2 teams in the same division, the Raiders or Chargers, so that comes first. But if you have the Dolphins, the Ravens, and the Chargers, 3 separate divisions, and the Chargers obviously haven't played the Dolphins, so that 3-way tie would come down to conference record. The Dolphins are 5-5 in conference, and their game tomorrow is the game tomorrow a conference game? I think it is. No, it's non-conference. Okay, so the Dolphins would be 5-5 regardless. The Chargers are 5-5, and the Ravens are 5-6. So then you'd have to go to the second set of tiebreakers, which is three. So then it would come down to one loss tied percentage in common games, and I do not have that offhand. So it would get it would get a little convoluted if the Dolphins were to win. I will look into that, and after that game Monday night, I'll have whatever the situation is. I'll have it explained in my final thoughts on Tuesday. Common games are like common opponents. It's the Raiders, Dolphins, Chargers all played the Broncos. I don't even know if that's the case. But if that lost the Broncos, that would be how you figured it out. Yeah, the tiebreakers go. I mean, it goes to there are 12 tiebreakers. The common game is fourth. So it goes common games, then strength of victory, then strength of schedule, then best combined ranking among conference teams and points scored and points allowed. Then it says best combined ranking among all teams and points scored and points allowed. Then best net points in conference games. Then best net points in all games. Then best net touchdowns in all games. And if you're still tied, it comes down to a coin toss. So Sai says they beat us with 4 common games. Yeah, but it would be common games among all 3 teams. So it's start pulling that thread. You can be at it for a while. So yeah, that's where we're at. Any more questions? It says my connection is unstable. Can you guys still hear me? Okay. We'll keep going. Talk Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer's playing really well. He's developing nicely. It fits really well in this offense just because he's a really good route runner in all areas of the field. He can play inside. He can play outside. He's strong. He's good after the catch. He's a really nice fit in the offense. And he's developing really well right now. And it gives them some flexibility on the Mike Williams decision this offseason. All right. Any more questions? Should have maybe tried Kenneth at middle linebacker when Drew went down, or inside linebacker is really what you're talking about. They had 3 edge rushers. Like literally, that's it. They had Chenna, Emeka Egbule, and Kenneth. So he had to play there. Like they didn't have any bodies, and like they could have tried to go with Jerry there, but he's not really a fit as an edge rusher in the scheme. So I felt like they maybe could have done more with Jerry, but it's not like relying on Jerry Tillery to set the edge is a great strategy either. Yeah. Oh, can you guys hear me? Yeah, I'm on the freaking. I'm on the hotel Wi-Fi. It's not connecting. Is it back? I'm not stealing Wi-Fi. I'm trying to do this on hotel Wi-Fi, which is not great. I'm getting a thing saying your connection is unstable. Please wait while we try reconnecting. And usually, when that happens, it comes back quickly. But for whatever reason, it's not going away. I think it's because I went on the NFL website and it just crashed my Wi-Fi. I believe if I refresh it, it will stop the stream. I can try to refresh if you guys want. Okay. I guess it's back now. Oh, we're back. Ronaldo Hill make many decisions for the defense. Can you hear me? I think we're good now. I think we're back fully on the Wi-Fi. It's because I went on the NFL website and it freaking crashed my Wi-Fi. If you have a problem with the Wi-Fi, send an email to Marriott because I'm in a Courtyard Marriott. So take it up with them. How did Asante look today? He had some good moments. He had some bad moments. I mean, he got beat on that double move in the 2-minute drill. That was definitely a bad moment. So, I mean, it's unfortunate because he was really starting to play well and show a lot of consistency, and then he's just been in and out. And as a rookie, that's just really hard. I wasn't expecting him to come back and just be what he was, before he suffered that first concussion. So, biggest need on D next season is defensive line, 100%, no question about it. And they should freaking trade up for Jordan Davis. Do the Chargers need to add some veteran coaches in the offseason? They don't have like veteran in the sense of like head coaching experience, but they have guys that have been in the league for a long time. So I don't know if that's totally necessary. Oh, Carson, I'm sorry. What did you ask? Because I was started answering your question, then I had a Wi-Fi issue. Send your question again, Carson. I'll answer it. Yeah, the kick returning was awful again with that Andre Roberts. He's a game changer. Oh, does Ronaldo Hill make many decisions for the horrible defense? So he's part of the game planning process, and he's very active in developing and coaching the secondary. That's really where he devotes most of his time. But it's Brandon Staley's brainchild. Like, he's the one that's calling the plays. This is his defense. So, and he would tell you this, like, he would take full responsibility for what happened tonight. Obviously he's limited in his personnel, and that's a factor in what's happening defensively. But I don't think this has come together the way that he expected it to, frankly. I mean, he keeps saying it's been a fight all year. It's been a fight all year. Like, nothing has really come easy for this defense. And, it's a personnel thing. It's a talent thing. They don't really have the depth. And I was thinking about this on my walk home. Like, why are the Chargers such a weird team, right? Like, I feel like they're really, like, they're just hard to pin down. Like, Thursday night football prime time, they go out, Derwin's in and out, and they go toe to toe with the Chiefs. And is it a perfect game? No, but you come away from that game being like, okay, the Chargers can compete with anyone in the league. That's the takeaway. That was the takeaway for me, just watching that game. Short week, and they come out and they play their asses off, and they really had a shot to win that. If they get a different, one different bounce late in the game, it all changes. And the Chiefs look like the best team in the league right now. Definitely in the AFC, right? But, them and the Packers probably. And then the next week they come out and do this. And it's like, okay, how can that happen? Why is that the case? Why is this team so hard to pin down? Because I feel like they are the most up and down volatile team in the league. And I think this is my hypothesis at least, their top like 25 to 30 players is as good as any top 30 players in the league. It's excellent. And Tom Telesco deserves a lot of credit for building that and getting that many star players and fitting all of them into the cap and all of that, right? But I feel like the drop off between their top like 25 to 30 players and their bottom, 23 to 28 players is enormous, right? Like that gap is huge. And so you look at a lot of these weird performances where you're like, what happened with the Chargers? Pretty much you can point to, okay, this guy was injured and this guy went in and didn't hold up his end of the bargain, didn't play at the same level. And so when you have certain guys go out, the drop-off is so large that you're getting these inconsistencies because there's such a large gap in terms of the top of the roster and the bottom of the roster. That's what I'm thinking. And I can go back to specific games where you can pin on some of these depth pieces. Is really a concern going into the season. Like, okay, the starting groups are really good, but what happens if they go through some attrition? And I think that's what you're seeing with this team. Like when they have everybody on the field, or mostly everybody on the field, it looks fantastic. But then you have a game like today where you're out, a lot of those top 25 players are not on the field. And what does it look like? You lose to the Texans. A Texans team that's missing 16 of their active roster players, right? How can you go from contending with the Chiefs to 10 days later losing to, a skeleton of the Texans roster, which was one of the worst rosters in the league? I think that explains it. You guys tell me. That's my thought initially, but I'm going to open another beer. Cheers. What do we think about that hypothesis? See, that's the thing is like, I think you just give it some time, right? Like I don't, and this is from Brandon, who asked, so did the Chargers just get a new GM? I don't know how many guys out there are better than Tom Telesco. Like, listen, I've criticized him, but you have to think about, okay, what's the alternative? And the grass is always greener. And you're talking about a guy that has built a really good roster. I mean, as much as everyone says that Justin Herbert fell into his lap, like he still drafted Justin Herbert. You can go down the list of all of these guys, like the undrafted free agents that he's identified consistently, like Austin Eckler. Who do you think that the credit for that should go to, right? So it's like, it's not where it needs to be, but I feel like you just give it some time. Like give them another off season to build out the depth, to get more players that are, in Staley's vision, that fit in the scheme, all of this kind of stuff, and see what it looks like in 2022. And I've been telling you guys this from the jump. You can go back and watch my streams from, April. You can go read my stuff on The Athletic. Like I told you guys that I felt like this team was a year away. And listen, I hear it. You say that every year, but this is the first year of Brandon Staley as head coach. And so if you believe in the idea that, okay, Brandon Staley is implementing his vision, it's going to take a little bit of time. And I think the early slate like really set expectations high, and everyone's like, okay, the Chargers are going to compete for a Super Bowl because they're 4-1. They beat the Chiefs and all this stuff, right? They never were that team. That was an illusion, as Brandon Staley likes to say. They're good, but they don't have the depth to win a game like today, right? And so I think this was always going to be somewhat of a building year. And I think I said that in my Reddit AMA before the season. I was like, I'm just going to gauge it by, are they playing meaningful games in December? And that has happened. This thing is definitely moving in the right direction. Justin Herbert has gotten better. They have a left tackle. The offensive line is much better than it's been in the past. You see, Derwin James is back and healthy and playing at a high level in the scheme. You've seen improvement from a number of defensive players, whether it's Kaiser White or Chet Nwosu or Nasir Adderley, right? Like guys that have improved. You feel like it's moving in the right direction. It's just not there yet because of what I'm saying. Like the top of the roster. It's so top heavy. And you need time to build out that depth. And what does that depth do, right? You get more talented players and draft better and fill your roster out better in that area, and it helps you in these situations, but it also improves your special teams. And you have all these young guys on special teams that are going to get a full year of experience, and they're going to get a whole off season to train as full-time professional football players, and they're going to come back next year. Nick Neiman and Eamon Agbangbamiga and all of these special teams guys and Larry Roundtree, and they're going to come back and they're going to be better on special teams. It's like it still feels like they need to build more. And I know that this is Tom Telesco's 9th season. He's going on a decade as the head of the personnel department, but this is year 1 for Brandon Staley. And I'm not trying to absolve what happened today, but he needs some time to build this thing the way that he wants to build it. And today was inexcusable. There's no doubt about that. But I feel like when you're looking at the big picture, it just feels like that's the issue. Like if you were just supposed to put your finger on, okay, why are the Chargers so dang inconsistent? Well, I think that gap between the top of the roster and the bottom of the roster is a pretty good explanation. What do we think about that? That was kind of a long-winded rant. I don't know if I would call it a rant. When I get going on rants, it's pretty intense. That was more of like a, I don't know, what would you call it? A nice discussion. So someone named Taylor keeps trying to say that I'm a Chargers fan. I'm not a Chargers fan. I'm not a Chargers fan. I'm an objective reporter. Everything that I say is my attempt to give you objective analysis of the team with no bias. Remember that. Bank it, as Brandon Staley would say. Chris O'Connor hops on the stream 37 minutes in, goes into the chat and says, just join. Can we start from the top? Well, Chris, the beauty of YouTube is that you can go to my channel and rewatch it on your own time. How about that? Soliloquy. I was going to say that. Yeah, it was a soliloquy. Let's go with that. How do you feel about Jerry Tillery? I need to watch the tape from this game to figure out what went wrong with the run defense. But over the last few weeks, I've seen Jerry get a lot better. I think you're starting to see him develop a little bit, which is, I mean, we can go back to a different stream where I went on a similar rant, just being like, give these guys a little bit of time. And I think you're starting to see a lot of these defense players get better, but I don't want to say, okay, Tillery's gotten better, and then, go watch this tape and see him, struggling in the run front. Because I don't know, like I'm watching it from the press box, and, I know that the run defense struggled, but you really have to go back and watch it really closely to figure out, okay, what's exactly going wrong on these runs. So, yes, he's improving, but I have a gut feeling that he didn't play his best game tonight. Chris said 10-7 with help. That's what we said a few weeks ago, and here we are. Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. I mean, that's saying, okay, they're going to get wins over the Raiders and Broncos, and I don't think that's a sure thing. Carson, you keep asking about Derwin. Emergency situation means like there is literally no one else to play. Like we need to be able to field a team, like a full 11 guys on the field, right? So that it didn't get to that. So and I think the priority was making sure Derwin's healthy. All right, what else we got, guys? How are we feeling? Do we feel a little bit better now? I'm sure a lot of you guys were like devastated. People ask what I'm drinking. This is a local Houston brewery, Eureka Heights Brewing. Wow Factor Hoppy Pilsner. I found it at Sprouts. Fourth down decisions seem different this week. There was only one that he could have gone for. It was a 4th and 5. The 4th and 5 from the Texans 28, late in the first. It was the second field goal they kicked. That one was a kind of a toss-up. Like, you could have explained that away with the win probability. But the first one was a 4th and 7. You're not going to go for it there. And then there wasn't, those 2 field goal decisions were, the first one was definitely a kick. The field goal in the third quarter was a 4th and 13. So you're only really going to have decisions when it's 4th and 5 or less, unless it's like, late in the game and you have to, go for it. Just try and give yourself any chance of winning. So, that's what Brandon Staley is getting to when he says, it's each situation is different, right? Like, the reason they went for it a lot in that game is because they had 2 4th and 1s, a 4th and 3, another 4th and goal from the 1, and a 4th and 5, 4th and goal from the 5. So it's like those are all within the yardage distance to gain for the win probability models to say, okay, this will increase your chances of winning. A lot of their 4th downs today were a little bit longer, which is why you didn't see the same decisions. 4th and 7 is a much lower probability of converting that than a 4th and 1, obviously. And that's the math you're factoring into it. All right, I think we're going to call it there. Yeah, let's call it there. All right, guys. For full takeaways, click the link below. Those are my takeaways off the game. We have a deal going at The Athletic right now for $24 for the year, so $2 a month. It's a really great deal, end-of-year deal. If you haven't signed up for The Athletic, tell them in the chat. Tell them in the chat. Tell them why they should join The Athletic and read my stuff. As far as what's coming this week, it's a normal week, so obviously takeaways are up now. That's everything. My initial thoughts on the game. Tuesday, I'll have my final thoughts where I just dive deep into the statistics and sort of, tie the loose ends on a bunch of stuff that I've been thinking about. 2 things that I know I'm going to write about in there is sort of the moving pieces in the secondary and what kind of factor that's had in the third down defense. And then also Justin Jones's impact on the run defense. So I'll get into that stuff more in depth in the final thoughts. I'll have a film review this week, which is probably going to be an autopsy of this defensive performance. So maybe not the most positive thing, but definitely, will give you some insight into what actually went wrong today. And we always do the mailbag on Friday. I know you guys like that. So keep an eye out on Twitter. I will send a tweet out to get questions for the mailbag. Otherwise, appreciate you guys joining as always. Everybody stay safe out there. And we will talk next week after the home game against the Broncos. Subscribe to The Athletic. Click the link. Peace out, everybody.